any suggestions or?
No, it's, I think we have new people today.
Oh, all new people. Okay, so that's good. So then we'll all be learning together then, right? I'm gonna take a little bit of my tea here first.
Just letting everybody in right now.
Oh, that's good. Everyone's very punctual. Wow. Much better than me. It's good you told me to come at 1:45. I'd have been maybe like, oh, 5 past. Oh, it's a time.
All right, let's just see, maybe around 4 more people.
Okay.
Where's everyone coming in from?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
I'm coming in from Vancouver Island, actually.
Oh, Vancouver, nice. I have a brother who lives over in North Vancouver, in fact.
Oh,
So
nice.
been out there a few times, not Vancouver Island, but I've been to Vancouver quite a number of times, in fact. So welcome.
Nice.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Yeah, it's 4 o'clock here. So it's,
Oh, right, yeah. So
that's-
yeah, good.
How would
And
I-
it's your first, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just asking if anybody wanted to share where they're coming from.
Yeah, or even also maybe what organization that they're representing as well. That might also, but I guess we can maybe do a little bit, as we like to say at University of Ottawa, we always say total de tab, you know, go around the table or around the screen virtually, right?
Yeah.
I'll since I'm unmuted, I'll just
You
start.
go for it.
I'll go for it. Right. So on Vancouver Island, we've got kind of 2 main cities, Victoria and Nanaimo.
Yeah.
And both of them have a masjid. But in between the cities is us, the little town of Duncan. So we're kind of, we don't have a masjid. We have to travel for Juma and prayers. So we're working on building our community here. So I'm really excited to do this today because I'm kind of tasked with developing the programs for children, for coordinating that. So I'm looking forward to see what we learned today.
Okay,
Hey,
great.
that's
Thank you.
great. Yeah, alhamdulillah. I think there's one other person who has their, oh no, I was going to say if there's anybody else that has their mic unmuted, we can go for them, but maybe it's better to go for volunteers, right? I don't know if anyone else wants to share a little
Diane
bit
just
about who
posted
they
one.
are and you know, which organization they represent, if indeed they do. And sometimes it's just personal interest, and that's also totally fine. And maybe also a few words about why they decided to come out this evening, Sunday night, 7 o'clock. I'm like, initially I was like, oh, okay, 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. I'm not quite certain about that, but I'm glad to see, yeah, there's quite a number of people. So.
Diane just posted in the chat, so feel free to post in the chat as well. He's from My Voice Canada, Muslim Youth Organization.
Okay, great. And as I mentioned to Najis previously, I'm not always certain if I can see your chat. So if I don't, or Najis, if you happen to see it as well, if you can just, you know, mention it, because I may or may not always see it.
I think we should get started just because we didn't allow, give too much time. It was a Sunday night, so let's just get on track. So I will do an intro. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for coming in today. I am Nargis Naqvi, the Director of Training at Sound Vision Canada, which is a registered charity. And we do a lot of professional development trainings in Canada. We have done some for the United States as well. Things like fundraising, just like we're doing now, or media spokesperson for your mosque, for your organization, or a weekend Islamic school teacher training. We have done several things like public speaking. and just excited to see, you know, the series of 3 different trainings that are coming up, which is so important for Ramadan, inshallah. Now, the best things that we've seen in our trainings is the more interactive it is, or the viewer videos are on, it will be better and interactive, inshallah. So please do consider having your videos turned on so we can all sort of share and participate. And we have Rita here, who is actually going to do her own intro because she can do it better than I can. So off to you, Rita. Thank you so much.
Sure. I'm just sorry. I'm just readjusting my my screens here. You know, I actually have 2 screens going, and you know they sometimes don't always align up 100% how I'd like them. But anyways, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me this evening. I'm just going to try and change my view just to see. Oh, now I can see a few more faces on there. Yeah, it's just to get the right setup going here. So as I just mentioned, my name is Rita Luffelholtz, and I've been working in the fundraising field for about the last 15 years or so. I originally started as a volunteer in Toronto at an organization called the Daily Bread Food Bank. So some of you might be from Toronto on the line. And from there, I moved on. I started working with a nonprofit organization called Save the Children Canada, again, based in Toronto. At that time, I was primarily responsible for foundation fundraising, grant writing, and what's known as prospect research, to get all the information on potential donors, right? From there, or the last 10 years or so, I've been working with the external relations team at the University of Ottawa. I've worked with the central development team, primarily on campaign planning and implementation. And then I've also worked with a number of the different faculties at the university, including the Faculty of Arts, Social Sciences, Education, Health Sciences, and Civil Law. There, I've been primarily responsible for raising major gifts, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the workshop this evening. Major gifts from individuals, foundations, and corporations. I also do a bit of coaching and mentoring a small team of fundraisers, as well as managing campaign volunteers. So I'm very pleased to be with you tonight, and welcome to those people that have just joined us on the session or on the call. So we all know that Ramadan is just around the corner. So I believe it's just about a month out. I checked on Google recently. I think it's April 2nd that it's projected for. For many Muslim organizations, you know, this is the time of the year when the bulk of their fundraising activities are done. The majority of funds are raised. So many of you are starting to think about, okay, well, what can I do? What are some of the fundraising activities that I can do this year to meet my organization's fundraising goals? So the reality is that your Ramadan fundraising plan should be part of your organization's overall larger annual fundraising plan. And today's workshop, we're going to look at how to create a fundraising plan for your entire organization, not just for Ramadan, but for the entire year. So some of you might be thinking already, oh, why do we need a fundraising plan? Let's just do what we did last year, it worked, let's repeat. Well, sure, maybe some of the tactics that you used in the past worked, but maybe some of them didn't. So this is going to be your chance. When you create a plan, you can evaluate each and every tactic that you used in the past and determine which is really a tactic that you want to continue, especially from, you know, what we call revenue maximization, or which ones give you the most bang for your buck, and which ones maybe weren't really that profitable overall, and you'll decide maybe this year we're not going to pursue that particular tactic. And the other thing about a fundraising plan is that it will allow you to reach a broader range of donors. So sometimes some organizations, they just focus on one particular tactic and they're going to do that every year. And then if something happens where they can't go ahead with that particular plan, then, you know, their whole fundraising campaign is in jeopardy. And we've seen this actually, you know, in the pre-pandemic period. There was a lot of Muslim organizations relied on our famous fundraising dinners to generate revenue, and organizations who relied only on that fundraising tactic. Some of them, if they weren't able to pivot, actually did end up suffering in terms of their fundraising results for the year. Some were able to pivot and transform their in-person events to virtual events, and they did have greater success. But the point of certainly today's session is that your fundraising plan should incorporate a lot of different tactics to reach a lot of different donors, a lot of different capacity levels, so that, again, should anything happen, it'll give you a lot of different tools to be able to use. I actually was wondering, you know, I mentioned the example about the fact that how organizations had to pivot from in-person events to online events. And I would actually be interested to see, and I don't know if anyone wants to share this at all, but how did your fundraising results compare from your in-person events versus your virtual events, especially when it came to the fundraising dinners? Because I know I personally participated in a number of virtual fundraising dinners. Does anyone want to share? I mean, they don't have to mention their organization, or they can, but I haven't really seen any, you know, large scale studies done, so it'll just be more word of mouth. Is anyone open to sharing how their results compared? I mean, those of you that had relied a lot on the fundraising dinners and then had to pivot into the virtual space. Feel free to put up your hand, or you know, if you do want to share. Okay. Anyhow, no worry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Muhammad Al Zabidi. I'm the president of Markaz. Maalaikum salam. Yeah, I'm the president of the Markaz Al Islam, and I have with me the VP for fundraising, Dr. Naseem Arouj, and brother Muhammad Asaf. He's the VP for school, and we're from Fort McMurray, which is probably the most northern city in Alberta. So the experience that we had because of COVID, we have to be a bit, try different tactics. Traditionally, we have been always doing, like fundraising in a Jum'ah, in one of the last Jum'ah, say of Ramadan or so, and we address, the people during the Jum'ah, and we try to do an actual fundraising. And we used to do like a very successful fundraising, but because of COVID and what have you, we were limited to the number of people coming in. So we had to really find some other ways. So we used, virtual, like Facebook and what have you. It wasn't really the greatest outcome that we were looking for. So, yeah, so that's something that's what we're participating here to see what other, venues or tactics that we can use to leverage, for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my specific question was really related to the fundraising dinner again, because, the fundraising dinners for some organizations, it's a real, they end up raising a lot of revenue every year. And then I was really more specifically, those that were able to convert those in-person fundraising dinners to virtual dinners, how did that compare? But clearly what you're saying is that a lot of your online revenue generating activities maybe didn't generate the same level of revenue as your in-person activities, which is to be expected. Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that. I do appreciate that. So ultimately, a fundraising plan is going to be your map to success. It's going to help your organization to maximize the return on investment of your fundraisers and other staff members' time and efforts. And it also helps, or will help, to keep your board, staff, and volunteers on the same page as far as what your overall fundraising goal is and what are the tactics that are going to be used, the timelines involved, and whether or not, and they can also determine whether or not there's enough human resources and volunteers available to implement each of the fundraising initiatives that you'd like to conduct. And ultimately, the other thing, the plan will also, have an agreement in terms of how the funds will be used. So combination of things, very, very important. I am going to now, just gonna go along here. And ultimately, I know somebody initially or prior to this workshop, they had talked about, okay, make sure you talk about accountability. Well, ultimately, a plan is going to help ensure accountability, because all of the stakeholders that were involved in developing the plan can come back and go and see, to what extent were the results that we had agreed on achieved or surpassed, or if it didn't really achieve the results, why did it fall short? So again, it just kind of gives you a map of where you want to go, what are the tactics that are going to be used, and later on you can go back and see, use it as a tool for measuring. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, I better get in the right screen here. I'm going to move to the second page in here. So what are some of the learning outcomes that, sorry.
We can't see your screen. If you've shared screen, it's not there.
Oh, okay. Well, then that might be, What can you see right now? What do you see? You just see me?
Just see all of us.
Oh, you only see yourselves. You don't see my shared screen.
Like even you, but yeah, not your shared screen. So if you want to try again, just
so weird. Okay. Let me just go. Okay, I'm going to try it again. It says here that I'm sharing it. How about now?
Now it's there. So we're on the learning outcomes page.
Okay,
two.
perfect. Yeah. So thank you for letting me know that because, yeah, I kind of assumed that it was on, but hey, it's all good. So yeah, so what are some of the learning outcomes for today's session? Well, first of all, you're going to learn what I would call either the key ingredients or the building blocks. I mean, there's different terminology you can use. What are some of the key ingredients that are required to create a fundraising plan? So, and again, a fundraising plan, it's never done in a vacuum, but it always has to be connected to your overall organizational goals and priorities. Secondly, we're going to talk about how to go about establishing your fundraising goal. Thirdly, what are some of
question?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead, please.
Are you going to share those slides later on?
Sure. Yeah, I could totally share them. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. Are you in your car? I hope that you're stopped.
Yeah. Actually, I'm driving.
I'm just having visions of you right now listening to this and driving at the same time.
Actually, I'm driving right now. I'll be home in like 10 minutes. So from there, I will be more comfortable. Okay, that's okay. You can carry on. All right.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely share it after, inshallah. Okay. So thirdly, we're going to look at, some of the different fundraising tactics that you can use. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each of the tactics, and determine which one's right for your organization. Because just because organization X or this organization use this tactic doesn't mean it's right for you. So again, what are some of the factors that you can use to determine which is the best tactic to use? And finally, which is my personal favorite, because this is the area that I work in, it's more how to go about securing large gifts, sometimes known as major gifts. And, when we talk about major gifts, this really varies depending on the size of your organization. So for some organizations, it's $5,000. For others, it might be $25,000. And still for others, those really big ones, it's like basically anything over $100,000. So yeah, there's probably not that many people on the call that are working in that larger space, but in any case, you never know. So we'll take a look at, what are some of the, what is some of the methodology you can say in terms of building relationships with major gift donors and how to bring them to the point where you can make an ask. Good. So any questions so far about the learning outcomes? Okay, perfect. Going to the next one. So we talked a little bit about some of the learning outcomes. The other thing is in terms of some of the skills that we're going to focus on, certainly one of them is on data collection, any kind of planning. Anyone who's involved in any kind of planning, whether it's fundraising planning or planning for anything, there's always going to be that element of collecting data, collecting information, and then taking all that, doing an analysis of all that information to come up with your ultimate plan. So fundraising plan is no different. Again, it's never done in a vacuum. Goal setting, you're going to learn about decision making. How do you make a choice between going with this tactic or this tactic or this tactic? And again, it's connected to what are the overall goals that you want to achieve, which varies from organization to organization. And the final skill that we're going to cover is in terms of building relationships. Okay, so before I actually get in or delve in, just going to do a little check again to see if there's any questions so far, either about some of the skills that we're going to learn, some of the learning outcomes, anything today?
I'm assuming you're going to actually explain the major gifts and stuff, because those are terminologies a lot of us won't know, right?
Absolutely. And if there's anything that does come up that maybe I might mention something, the thing is when you work in the field, sometimes, and this is true again for every field, fundraising, no exception, if you're an engineer, if you're a doctor, sometimes you do use terms and you kind of incorrectly assume that everyone understands all the terms. So if I do use a term that anybody on the call or at the workshop is not familiar with, don't hesitate to ask me. I would be more than happy to explain further. But hopefully I will explain the terms as I go along. But just in case it happens that I haven't explained something, or there's nothing worse than when you have one word that the person keeps saying and you're just not really certain what that word means, and it kind of prevents you. Becomes a barrier to understanding the whole the whole training, right? So absolutely feel free if there's anything that you need further clarification on. Okay, so first of all, where do you begin? So you have been asked to come up with a fundraising plan for your organization. So depending on your level of experience, your first reaction might be to go into full panic mode. What do I do now? What's the very first thing? So as with any good plan, the very first step is to collect information and then to analyze that information or that data. So the thing is, what kind of information are we looking for? What kind of information should you collect, in terms of your building blocks of your plan? So we're going to take a look at kind of three different areas or three key ingredients, three building blocks that we need to develop a fundraising plan. So the very first ingredient or building block is what is known as the organizational strategic plan. Now that might be that might be a barrier word in there. People may or may not have heard of that before. It certainly is a plan that focuses or it tells externally and internal audiences basically what is your organization trying to achieve. Okay, and it's really essential to understand your organization. If you're going to raise funds for an organization, you absolutely have to understand different components of it. But before I actually get into the different parts of a strategic plan, how many of you actually work for an organization that has a strategic plan or that you know has a strategic plan? Maybe I can just see a show of virtual hands or maybe hands on the screen. Okay, so I can only actually see 4 people on my screen, so good. If anybody else wants to, oh, I see a few more now. Now I've changed my screen setting here. Now I can actually see 6 people, so I'm good. Okay. Yeah, or if you want to use any of the, I think there's another little virtual hands too. Sometimes they come up, sometimes they don't. But okay, well that's perfect. So if you actually have, or if your organization has a strategic plan, then that will definitely make your fundraising job much easier. If you don't have a strategic plan, then you might have to ask some of those questions to your organization's leadership. So, but it doesn't make it impossible. Okay, so what are some of the components or what are some of the essential things to know about your organization that ultimately will, you know, be very important as you develop your plan? First of all, it's essential to know what's your vision or what's your organization's vision of the future. So every strategic plan, every organization should have a vision. Well, this is what our ideal state will look like. This is what our ideal world looks like, or our ideal community looks like, or the group that we deal with. This is what the ideal future looks like for that particular group. So it's really important because again, you're going to incorporate a lot of that vision and a lot of this information about the organization into your plan as well as into your future discussions with donors. Your mission. Why does your organization exist? If you don't know why your organization exists, it's going to be so difficult to go out and ask people to support your organization. So these are critical things. Again, what are some of the key goals? What is your organization planning to do to realize that vision of the world? What are the key outcomes that it wants to achieve? So it should be very clear. Again, if you're with an organization that doesn't have a strategic plan, then you need to really have a sit down with your organization's leadership and ask them these questions. So you have a very clear idea. What are their goals and how are they going to go about achieving those goals? And a lot of the objectives to achieve those goals sometimes come in the form of different programs and different services, which ultimately, again, are going to be linked back to your fundraising plan. Defining objectives and goals sometimes can be tricky. It sounds really basic, but I know I've witnessed different organizations in the past, and some want to do everything for everyone and be everywhere. And so that, or organizations that really don't have very clear goals and objectives established, will make a fundraiser's job very, very difficult. So you'd always want to sit down and say, okay, out of all the things you want to do, where are we going to focus on for our fundraising plan? Because you really can't do everything. And again, you're going to want to be in a situation where you can measure back and measure results and successes. A few other key things that are normally found in the strategic plan, which again is very important for you as a fundraiser to know: who's the main target group of your organization's services and programs? How much does it cost to deliver your programs and services? And this is a super important point. How are you different? So we call this like the differentiation factor. How are you different from other organizations that operate in a similar space? For example, in my town where I live right now, we have about 5-6 mosques, right? So what is the thing that differentiates all of these mosques? You know, is it just geography? Are there other factors? So again, you'd want to know, how are you different? Because you're going to use that in terms of making your sales pitch ultimately to potential donors. And the other point in your organizational strategic plan is, how do you go about measuring success of your programs in general? We'll talk later on about measuring fundraising success, but here we're just looking at the organization. Yes, Mahreen, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. I just had a quick question about the target group. Should the strategic plan also identify a target donor group, or is that not something that?
Okay, so right now, your target donor group, that's going to come in your fundraising plan. So right now, we're not actually at the fundraising plan. We're just more or less at the information collecting stage. So right now, we're just making sure that we really understand our organization. Okay, then we'll move on to our fundraising plan. So right now, yeah, it's really your programs and services who they're targeting. Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, though, for that question. Okay, so that's so-called building block one, ingredient one, if you will. The second very important information that you should be looking for and collecting, and again, your organization may or may not have this already ready, is what's known as your case for support. So the case for support is really the why. So the very first part was all about your organization. What do they stand for? What do they do? Now we're really looking at the why. Your case for support actually is a document that tells the story of your organization. Again, focusing on why donors should give money to your organization. Why is your organization necessary, and why should they support you now? So there's a lot of whys in there, but that's going to be key, because without the why, it's going to be very difficult to sell and to encourage donors to support your activities, right? In addition to the why, there's also the what factor here too. What problem are we trying to solve? So a lot of organizations, they have to show in terms of what are they doing? Again, if we tie that all back to the overall vision, what's our view of what the world is like in the future, or our community is like in the future? What are we trying to solve? How are we making the world a better place? Other what's that are involved oftentimes are referred to in the case for support, or what are you planning to do with your gift? You have to know what you're planning to do with your donor's gift. You can't go out there, well, I need $1 million right now. I'm not saying that a lot of you are going to do that, but you have to have a very clear plan. What are you planning to do? And what impact will that donor's gift have on your programs or services that your organization is offering? The other what factor, if you will, is what will happen if we don't get your support. Again, your case for support should also touch on that. And ultimately, what action do you want this donor or this supporter to take? The other point also that often comes out in the case for support, so we talked a little bit about the why donors should give, the what factor in terms of impact, but also normally the case for support also includes how much. How much do we need to achieve our goals, to implement our view of the world or our vision of the world? So these are a number of different items that it's good to understand before, or foundational documents, foundational information that's required as you start to build your fundraising plan. Any questions so far? In terms of, we've covered like 2 main ingredients or 2 main building blocks. We're now going to get onto the numbers game. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So here we go into building block 3. So first step, as we said, was really organization. Second was the why. Now we're going to take a look at, to create your annual fundraising plan, you really have to understand what your past fundraising results are. So this, again, is a very critical component to developing your plan. So before you actually look into your fundraising results, it's also important to have a look at your organization's financial statements. And your financial statements normally that include all the revenue that your organization gets. Some of it will come from fundraising, maybe some of it comes from government or government grants or government, different levels of government. Maybe some of it comes from, maybe you have other revenue generating activities. So you'll have usually all the revenue that's collected and all your expenditures, usually, how much are you spending on administration, how much on communication, how much on all the different programs and services that you're offering. So that's your baseline, and that'll give you an idea about the size of your organization as well. And from there, you can start to hone in now onto the lines that talk about fundraising. So some of the key things or key indicators that you want to take a look at is how much was raised last year. This is going to give you a little bit of a baseline, not only last year, but how much was raised in the last 3 years as well. Then you'd also want to take a look at fundraising trends. Has it been going up? The total amount of your fundraising revenue, has it been increasing? Has it been pretty static, or has it been going decreasing over time? So again, you'd want to have just a bit of an idea about like the fundraising, overall global fundraising picture for your organization. I often use, when I know, certainly because I do fundraising plans for each of the faculties that I work with, and usually what I like to do is not just take a look at the last one, but I actually do an average of the last 3 years. And the reason I do that as a baseline is because sometimes what will happen, you'll have a year where maybe you might receive the planned gift. Let's say one year you received a $250,000 estate gift. Well, that might not be something that's going to be repeated the next year. Or let's say if you work in maybe, supplying supplies for organizations or groups overseas. Maybe one year there's an emergency came up, and then maybe you collected a lot of information to help with a flood or a hurricane or some kind of disaster that again might not be repeated the following year. So usually I like to take take the average of the 3 years as a baseline again, from which to start my plan. Yes, Marie?
Sorry, I was just wondering if you would extend that to beyond 3 years, considering
Yeah,
the pandemic?
absolutely. And if you have the data, yeah. And in fact, it's good to do a 5-year. I mean, if you don't have time, because of course, the longer you go back, then the more time it's going to be. And there's a lot of factors to look at when you're developing the plan. If you want to go faster, go for 3 years. But if you want to go longer and really get a much fuller picture, for sure, you can absolutely go for, you can go for 5 years. And that might even tell you a different trend too, right? Obviously, the last 2-3 years, and actually, it might even be wise, especially because the last 2 years we've been in COVID. And so that's affected a lot of people's numbers for a lot of the different fundraising streams. So some people actually do prefer to go for 5 years because then that'll give them a bit better picture of what was the situation like pre-COVID. But again, we're still coming out of COVID, so there's still going to be an impact of COVID. So as you like, it's going to depend on your time and how many factors you're going to look at and compare in terms of trends. So absolutely.
What if somebody's doing this for the first time and they haven't raised any funds before? It's like a brand new.
Yeah. So then if you're doing it for the first time, then you're really starting at zero. The only thing what you might want to do is you might want to take a look at similar organizations that are operating in your space. But again, if they're organizations that are operating in your space, they've probably already been doing it for a little bit of time. So they probably already have started to build up their donor database, right? So I mean, if you're starting from zero, then you're probably not going to be doing a lot of that. You're not going to be doing a lot of the historical analysis. You're going to be like, okay, what can we do? Nobody knows about us. So the very first thing, if nobody knows about you, then you're really going to focus a lot on communications, getting the word out. You're going to be using other channels because you're really at the very early stages of trying to raise the profile of your organization, right? And talk about the impact and talk about what you're trying to do. So it's really more about the fundraising at that point, and then maybe after year one, you might, if you're a new organization, you might want to try a few, maybe more online campaigns. And I know Ambar is going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. So that might be your first step. So in this case, yeah, this fundraising plan that we're kind of developing together collectively tonight, it's really based on an organization that has been fundraising maybe for a few years at different levels. But it's a fantastic question. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we talked about the fundraising trends. Some of the other factors or indicators that you'd want to look at is the number of your donors. Okay, so you'd want to see how many people gave to your organization last year. And it could be like unique donors. Sometimes one donor will give multiple gifts, but you'd want to take a look at how many unique donors do you have. And again, that'll tell you an idea about the size of your organization. How does that compare to the year before? So again, you might want to do an analysis of the last 3 years. Have the number of donors been increasing? Has it been staying flat? Has it been decreasing? If you find it decreasing, sometimes it might be cause for alarm, but again, there's other factors to consider too, because if you look at overall fundraising trends in Canada and even North America, you'll find that the number of donors per organization has actually been going down. However, on the other side, the gift size, the overall gift size has been increasing. So if you find the number of your donors is going down, that doesn't necessarily mean that your revenue is going down, but still it's good to take a look at all of these different factors. So, so you take a look at your 3-year trends of your number of donors, average gift size. So this is a very important point. So, you'd want to be working towards maybe, now just to mention your question, if you're a brand new organization, maybe people are going to try you out. They might only give you $25 now, but as you become more established and people know you and know that you can deliver and you've built up your credibility, then you can start to ask people for larger and larger amounts. And that's when your overall average gift size per donor can go up, right? And if it's not going up, then you have to ask yourself, maybe you're going to have to mix it up in terms of how you're approaching donors and the strategies that you're using. Another key indicator that you'd want to take a look at is donor renewal rates. Very important. Okay, so if you have a number of donors last year, let's say you had 1,000 donors last year to give to your organization. Well, maybe this year only 250 of those donors renewed. That already requires some serious analysis, because in general, most organizations lose about 20% of their donors from one year to the next. So if you're losing a lot more than that, then that means again that you might have to tweak your approach, and maybe you have to focus a little bit more on stewardship, stewarding your donors. And I know we have another forum in 2 days or 3 days on stewardship, so that might be another opportunity to learn a little bit more about some of the stewardship tactics that will help you retain some of your donors, especially if you find you're losing a lot of donors. Another indicator also is renewal of lapsed donors. So sometimes you might have donors, they'll give for a few years and all of a sudden they go off the radar. Maybe they haven't given for this year, maybe they didn't give the next year. So what are you doing to try and re-engage those lapsed donors? So, and again, so there might be targeted strategies that you'll have to use, and you'd want to look at your rates. Is the number, again, every year you'd be taking a look at how many of your lapsed donors have you renewed. So you'd want to look at your trends. Is it going up? Well, if you're able to re-engage and renew a lot of lapsed donors, then you're definitely trending in the right direction. So again, you might want to look what you're doing, and you can expand some of those strategies that you're doing to renew those lapsed donors. The other important point, and this is going to depend on your organization, is the geographical breakdown of your donors. So some of you are operating maybe just locally in terms of an organization. Some of you are operating nationally. Maybe some of you are even operating, across North America. Well, it might turn out once you do an analysis of your donor database, maybe some of them all live in certain areas. So then you have to take a look at, okay, what are we doing? Why is it that so many people from this area are giving and this area are not giving? So are there things that we're doing in that particular geographical region that we can replicate in other areas, right? So again, it's part of the analysis. And has the trend been going up or down in certain areas? So again, these are all different factors that you're going to take in, you're going to look at, and you're going to say, and at the end, we're going to do a bit of an analysis. But they are all just different factors, different performance indicators that you're going to reflect on and analyze to see, where are the opportunities, what kind of strategies. So another factor in here too, well, actually there's two more on this particular page about what are the popular or the most popular gift designations. And maybe there's certain programs that your organization is offering that are super popular. Everyone's giving to those. And maybe there's others that are not. So again, you'd want to do a bit of analysis. So why is that? What is it? Why is this program so popular out of all the ones that we're offering? And this one, nobody is supporting this program. That's if they designate as opposed to a general, just a general organizational gift. Maybe the program that nobody is supporting, maybe it has more to do with marketing. Maybe people don't know about that program. So once you take a look at all the data, then you can start to reflect on that and see, okay, well, maybe this is an opportunity, or maybe we should do this, or maybe we should pivot here. So again, just different factors to consider when you're developing your plan.
Vida, what is the difference between a donation and a gift?
Well, they are pretty similar. We often use them interchangeably. In general, we can say that, a donation in the sense that, like if we look at the Canadian Revenue Agency, it should be given voluntarily. And again, if it's an organization that is registered in Canada, then you will be eligible for a tax receipt. A gift, so a gift is pretty similar. You can also do like gifts in kind. So sometimes let's say if it's a service that you give, then that wouldn't be tax receipted. So there is like a very slight variation, but oftentimes we do use them interchangeably, right? If I give you a product, let's say I'm going to give you, let's say we're having an awards show and I'm going to give you, 500 packets of food or 50 packets of food, that's an actual tangible product that can be evaluated. In that case, I can still be eligible for a gift receipt. So even though that's a gift in kind, right? It's not actual cash gift. So
is there
we
any
use them.
reason?
Sorry?
Is there any specific reason that you use the term gift size rather than donation?
No, I mean, for me, it's very similar.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say, gift sizes, for the purposes of this particular workshop, we'll just use them interchangeably. There might be a very fine, and maybe I know Brother Shad, I think, is on the line as well, if he has more information. But for me, normally, I know in our workplace we use them interchangeably, more or less.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. We use interchangeably that word. It's more, gift is a more of a restricted word compared to donation.
Yeah, I mean, a donation also can be respected. I mean, I think it just depends on. But either way, as long as people understand what you're referring to, I think it's good. So the other final, before I move on to the next, the next slide, is about the source of fundraising. This is another thing that you can analyze as well, because you want to see, is the majority of your revenue coming from individuals, or is it coming from foundations or corporations, or is it family businesses? Again, you'd want to take a look, because if the majority is from individuals, maybe this is an area you can further develop it. Or maybe if you're not really getting a lot from corporations or family businesses, maybe that's an area that you want to further develop. So again, you do your analysis and then you can see where do the opportunities lie. Okay, any questions before I move on to, we're going to take a look at return on investment of past fundraising tactics. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the next slide?
That's fine. Go ahead.
Yes?
I said, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at what's the return on investment. And this, you're going to hear this a lot, because in the fundraising world, we always use this. You know, how much did it cost us to do this? And what did we get at the end of the day? Because not everything you do is going to have the same return. There are going to be some tactics that you're going to use that you're going to make a very high return. And there's going to be some tactics you're going to use, it's going to cost you almost the same amount to get that amount of money. So then and again, this is going to help you decide which tactic you're going to go forward with. But it's not only return on investment. Well, a little bit later on in this workshop, we'll see there's other factors to consider, but this is definitely a big factor to consider in terms of whether you use this particular strategy or tactic or another. So we already talked about.
I have a question here.
Yeah,
if
sure.
I can.
Sure.
What do you think? What would be a good ROI in journal? Like 70%, 80%, 60%, 40%. What do you think
Yeah.
that
So what I'm
would
going
be
to
a
do?
good ROI for the fundraising?
Yeah, so if you're going to, if you maybe wait another, like I would say about 2-3 minutes, I have another slide that's going to give you like the average return on investments for different tactics that you can use, and
Okay.
so that'll give you a clearer idea. And then, but that
Based on,
doesn't mean
I'm
that.
asking just based on your experience.
Oh.
What would be a good number? Yeah.
Yeah, I think about, honestly, it really depends on the tactic. You're going to find that some tactics, for example, if you use direct mail, so if you are mailing your donors, even if it's just a card about your organization, where they can fill out and return back to you, that's usually very high. There's very high cost associated with that. So normally to raise $1, sometimes with that kind of method, it almost, like, let's say for $1, it almost costs you sometimes 90 cents to raise $1. Sometimes if it's a new donor that you haven't interacted with before, sometimes it even can cost you more than $1 to get that new donor. So people might say, whoa, why am I going to use that if it's going to cost me money to get that new donor? But again, it's because you're not only looking at the donor for this year, you're going to be thinking about retaining that donor for the next number of years, right? So you're looking at overall lifetime value. So I think the return on investment ultimately.
Sorry to interrupt you. My own background is marketing.
Yeah.
And let me introduce myself. Probably I didn't because I was driving at the time. Right now.
Okay.
I'm a specialized person in the digital marketing, and I'm in board of the Islamic Center of Markham in Markham, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I myself am MBA from the Harvard in digital marketing.
Okay. And
being a digital marketer or a marketer, brander, so I can understand that, okay, for the new customer, you can see we calculate those as a CAC value, customer acquisition cost, we call that, right?
Yeah.
And CLTV is another term we take in the ROI, is customer lifetime value.
Exactly.
Fine,
Yeah.
this year it might be costing at 90 cents per dollar, but the next year the CLTV might be pretty low, maybe 20
exactly.
cents.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking you on the basis of the average, because we are not taking just one individual donor or gift giver. We are talking as a whole. When we take the ROI, not we calculate on the basis of the individual person. We take whatever the cost incurred and whatever the revenue got, right? So that was my question.
Yeah, so normally on average, if you think about all the different revenue streams, usually it's about 20 cents for every dollar to raise. So that would be an average. So like even if you look on, let's say if you go on the Canadian Revenue Agency and you can take a look at different nonprofit organizations, usually it costs them, usually for administrative fundraising communication costs, it's usually about 20% and about 80% goes to their programming, right? So on average, you could say about 20 cents to raise every dollar.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So any case here, this is just, very, very quickly in terms of how we go about calculating the return on investment. So you would take your overall total. So let's say you had a fundraising event and you raised $20,000 at the event, but cost you $10,000 to actually run that event. So that means that your net income at the end would be $10,000. So in that case, it would cost you 50 cents to raise every single dollar. But that's just, net income. But then you could also maybe factor in your in-kind donations, at that event. Then you'd also have to factor in staff costs, volunteer time. So that also might give you a little bit of a different ROI as well. So just to answer.
Okay, how do you calculate and put them in the ROI as a cost volunteer time? Do you take a fixed rate for them, or how do you take in account?
Yeah, you know what, and it's interesting because sometimes people put that in at like minimum wage. Okay, let's say if to do this event it costs like if it took 20 volunteer hours, you might put it in at the minimum wage level, right? But then others, they actually say, well, no, you should actually see what kind of volunteer work are they doing and then cost it out at the actual cost that would. Because if you're just maybe at the reception desk, it might be different than if you're doing the accounting for, volunteering to do all the expenses and, accounting for the event or whatever. It depends on the role that you're doing. You should actually cost it at what the value of that role is, opposed to just.
Is it necessary to bring it into account for these things? Is it important? Because what? As a board member, our cost per hour is pretty high. We are not the minimum wage people, but we are not charging, we're volunteering. Like I have my own business. I'm running a digital marketing company, right? When I give my services as a consultant, I charge $200 per hour.
Right. So I think here,
masjid, because I'm working every single day 4 hours in the masjid. So at the end of the year, multiplied by 400, multiplied by 365, how much it will cost if I will put that there?
Yeah.
If you're saying
I totally hear you, and I think the main three or the main things to consider are the first three lines, in the sense that what's your gross, what were your direct costs, and ultimately what was your net income. But the other factors are also good to know. But absolutely, if your consultancy rate is whatever, a couple hundred an hour, for sure that's going to affect your rates. But it's just good to factor in, right? Like,
it's Mohammed here. I have a quick question. It's not really related to directly to this, but like volunteering, as the brother mentioned, we all as a volunteers, like we put a lot of hours. Is this something that with the CRA that these volunteer hours can be converted into a value that can be like used as a donation to the volunteer? No? There's no way.
Unfortunately, no. I mean, your organization can talk about it maybe in its annual report, but it's not like you can get a charitable tax receipt or anything like that for services. If you gave gifts in kind, or let's say if you had a business and then you donated actual product or something, then for products, yes, you can actually get a receipt for actual products. But when it comes to services, volunteer time, no. So, but your organization can still calculate all that in, and when they're giving their final report, and you say, well, during the past year, we had X amount of volunteers who volunteered more than 500 hours or whatever. I mean, so that's something that they can show, because it shows also a widespread support in the community too.
So that's why I was saying, ma'am, that we cannot take into consideration our cost as a volunteer time as well. We never take that. Because it is not, we cannot reflect in the balance sheet or in the income statement of our not-for-profit organization, right?
Right. I was just putting that down here as just other things to take into consideration, but it doesn't mean you're going to, right now at this point, as far as evaluating each tactic, you're really just looking at what is the overall income that you were raised from this tactic, what were the costs, and then ultimately you subtract the cost, and then you would get your net income. The other three about the in-kind donations, direct, indirect staff costs, volunteer time, that's really all other factors to take into consideration. And I'm mentioning it just because maybe events takes 500 or 100 volunteer hours. Again, it's something to take into consideration if you want to pursue that strategy or not. So just to keep in mind. Okay, so I'm just going to move right along here. So on this page, you can actually, or on this particular slide, you can actually see some of the different costs to raise a dollar for different methods that you're going to use. So you'll see there direct mail acquisition. So that's what I was telling you about, where it's sometimes it can be 90 cents or up to 125 just to recruit or to get one new to get a new donor. Again, in some cases, the return on investment or the average cost to raise $1 is much lower as you go down here. So product sales, we see here direct mail renewal. So if you're renewing somebody who's already a donor and you send them direct mail, it's not going to cost you too much because there's a high probability they're going to return your form, they're going to make a donation, right? If you look in here, major gifts, again, we're going to get to that later on. You'll see it costs between 10 cents to 20 cents to raise $1. So this is something I'm going to underline because I know a lot of Muslim charities, they work a lot in some of the annual campaign tactics, but maybe not so much in the major gifts. And so we just want to make sure that they're maximizing their overall revenue. And then here, average cost to raise $1 of all methods is roughly about 25 cents on the dollar. I said 20 cents, but 20, 25. Again, it depends. Your organization might be very different here. So something to think about. Any questions so far?
But there are organizations which are not for profit,
Yeah.
but they have the heavy cost, like Islamic Relief,
Yeah.
IDRF. Those are also not for profit organizations. They do donation collection, right?
Yeah.
But their cost is very high because they have mostly high paid staff, not majorly the volunteers. But for the masajid all around the North America, only 1%, even less than 1% are the paid staff. The rest are volunteer. So how you would compare, or how did you get this data of 0.25 cent, or is it 25, per dollar, which is 25%? How did you get that?
Yeah, this was actually taken from a Canadian. These are fundraising averages in Canada. So it was actually taken from a book on fundraising in Canada, basically, and that the author.
Is it for the overall, all the religions, or only for the Islamic Center?
It was an average. Yeah, this is not just based on solely on Muslim organizations. This is just in general. You know, these are just general averages. As you can see, there's another column. You'd have to calculate your own organization's cost to raise $1 in this column right in here.
All right.
Marine has a question.
Yeah, I think Marine has a question there. Yeah, sound like
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, a lot of these methods, direct mail acquisition and all of that, have been replaced by virtual methods, and so I'm wondering what the cost of that is and how to calculate that.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and it wasn't included in here. And tomorrow night, actually, there's going to be another session. So I don't know whether you're planning to attend tomorrow night, but there's actually a digital marketing session tomorrow. And I know that Sister Anbar is going to go into a lot more details in terms about how to maximize your revenue from telemarketing. And I'm not certain whether she's going to touch on return on investment of each of those, but you can definitely ask that question to her. Today, I'm not really going too much into telemarketing, only because I know that her whole segment tomorrow is going to be based on that. So you can definitely follow up with her at that time.